I want to start also by just saying again, the name of the session that you've joined today is Expressive Arts Therapy, Trauma-Informed Tools for Youth and Young Adults. Great to have you all join. So we'll just start with the disclaimer that just a reminder that although we are funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the content of this session may not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA, the Department of Health and Human Services, or the agency that I work with, which is the Center for Applied Research Solutions. And then also just a note about security in case we have any security issues happen during this session. What we'll do is just end the session, and then you could look in your email inbox for sign instructions that will be with a different link. All right, so a little bit about us. We are with the Pacific Southwest MHTTC. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this, you'll see on this map right here, the entire region that MHTTC is made up of. We are here in Region 9, which includes the US Pacific Islands, Hawaii, Arizona, Nevada, and California. And with the map here, you'll see that the different colored boxes represent the different types of services that we provide. The blue boxes are the addiction TTCs. The green boxes are the prevention TTCs, and the orange boxes, which include our center, are the mental health TTCs. And we want to acknowledge that many of you are joining from all over this map and beyond, and that we welcome you all. And also, if you are from a different center and you want to be connected with that center, go ahead and drop us an email, and we'd be happy to get you connected. A little bit more about us is that we offer a collaborative model in which we provide training, technical assistance, and resource dissemination. And our goal is to promote evidence-based, culturally appropriate mental health prevention, treatment, and recovery strategies so that providers and practitioners can start, strengthen, and sustain them effectively. And of course, you'll see all the services here that we provide, such as webinars like what we're on today. We have a lot of resources that are on our website that we welcome you to go ahead and browse through. All of these that you see here and more, check us out on our website, which you'll see here in this slide. We also do provide technical assistance, and so you can contact us if you're interested in that. All of these services are free of cost, being that we are grant funded. And then we also like to just encourage you all to join us in our the kind of language and values that we have, that you can see here, that we are a center that uses strength-based and hopeful values, that we are healing-centered, trauma-responsive. We are person-first and free of labels, and everything else that you can see here, which we encourage you to join us with. And so with that being said, let me just go ahead and move on to today's presenter, which I am so honored and so happy to have Suraya join us. Suraya NFT is a registered expressive arts therapist, registered drama therapist, and licensed clinician or clinical supervisor who has worked for 25 years in schools, prisons, hospitals, psychiatric units, and in private practice with children, teens, and adults. And so all of this, you can see Suraya has been in this field for quite a while and is a very seasoned practitioner of everything that she's going to share with us today. And so with that, let's go ahead and get into today's presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. And thank you, everyone. Welcome. Really great to have you all here. My name is Suraya, and I'm excited to be here with you all and offer a little taste of tools from the expressive arts, meaning multiple arts modalities that hopefully you can bring back to use with your clients. Maybe you're already using the arts, great, but I want to give you a kind of sampling of some of my favorite tools that I've used with youth of lots of different ages, lots of different cultural backgrounds, and diverse backgrounds through the years. I also want to give a shout out to Joyce Lim, licensed marriage and family therapist, who inspired this training for the City of Fremont Department of Human Services, Health and Human Services. So thank you so much, Joyce Lim. And I also want to just say, it is a little odd sometimes to be here on Zoom giving a training, a trauma-informed training, when a big part in my mind of what is helpful with trauma is co-regulation or being with each other. So the fact that I can't see you right now is a little odd, but it's okay. I just want to name that such a big piece of how, in my mind, we create spaces of healing is in that relationship, in that connection, in providing a safe space where whoever we're working with, youth or adult, gets to be in the experience of having this co-regulated state. So, but we will have some moments of being together on the video. So we'll play with that. And for today's training, here are the objectives. We will distinguish between bottom-up and top-down approaches to working with trauma, number one. Number two, actually number 2 through 4, we're gonna practice and learn about interventions that are geared towards the 4 common trauma responses. So the fight response, the flight response, the freeze response, and the fawn response, which we'll talk about more in just a moment. But next slide. So here's our agenda. After a little more of an introduction, we'll review those 4 common trauma responses. We'll review bottom-up and top-down approaches to trauma. Expressive arts generally is more of a bottom-up approach, but it does integrate both top-down and bottom-up interventions. And then most of our 2 hours today will be engaged in experientials. I'll be inviting you to try out activities and to think about, to reflect on how you could use or adapt what we're doing today for your clients, depending on their age, their background, all of that. And then we'll end with some reflections and a discussion. And in the next slide, here's one of my favorite quotes on trauma by Karen Samuelson. Often it's the deepest pain which empowers you to grow into your higher self. So just invite you to take that in, see if there's any resonance, and yeah, whether in your own life there's been any experience of having gone through something hard that has helped you to grow. And I like to really hold that, knowing when I'm working with youth, even if that's not something they think, just holding that there's potential to grow from going through hard stuff. So, okay, we're going to get a little bit silly in a moment, but first I want to just invite you all on the chat to share 2 things. One is how you're feeling right now. Like, I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling excited, I'm feeling stressed. So the first thing, how you're feeling right now. And the second, how you would like to feel, how you would like to feel. So I would like to feel calm and energized. So I see happy, curious, great from Kevin, excited, full, Madeline, sleepy, Lydia, stressed. So thank you for commenting and putting that in the chat. Grateful. So now I want to invite you to think about how you would like to feel and make a kind of exaggerated movement with your body of how you would like to feel. And I don't know if there's anybody in the room with you, but do what feels right with everything in our training today. So for example, I want to feel energized. So this is my movement for energize. So just go ahead and take 5 seconds to just be big. Like, what's that movement you want to feel? Great. I see creative, calm, Beautiful. And just notice, how did it feel in your body to just take 5 seconds to make that movement? Great. Beautiful. And now you can hold that movement, do that movement anytime you wish in our workshop today. And a few other things just to help ourselves resource. So, it's so important we working with others that we're resource and we're in a space where we can actually be of service to others. So let's use our senses a bit. And I invite you to just look around and see something that pleases you. Like I'm looking at the sunlight sparkling on the leaves and the trees outside, and that kind of feels pleasing to me. So just look around. What's something that genuinely pleases you, and just with your vision, and take that in. Good. And now, great. I see your dog. Somebody's Patricia's dogs, or Patricia. Great. And then how about, what's a sound you're hearing right now, or could imagine hearing, that pleases you? A sound. So just take, just about 5 seconds. Maybe the sound of the ocean you imagine, or saw Sarah write the ocean. Great. So taking in a sound or imagining you're hearing something that pleases you. Great. And now how about a smell? A smell that would please you. Think of a smell. And a taste. I see cinnamon, apple, roses. Great. All right. So we'll pause there, but I just wanted to invite you all into a short activity where you can orient towards things that please you, just a very simple way of resourcing ourselves. And now, to get to know each other, we're gonna pause our slideshow here and play a game called Raise Your Hand If. So get ready to see a lot of faces if you want to come on screen. So if Ingrid, if you could pause our slideshow. And all right, seeing some faces. So this is a game I like to play with groups of youth. You could play it online, or you could also do it if you're live with a group. So I'm just going to say, raise your hand if, and then if what I say is true for you, you can raise your hand, okay? Then I'm going to vary it, not just hand raising, but some other fun things. So raise your hand if you're feeling stressed today. Anybody else feeling stressed? Okay, I see a few. Thank you. And hands can go down. All right, stick out your tongue if you have a playful side. Stick out your tongue if. All right, some tongues. Thank you. Great. All right, how about raise your hand if you feel loved by someone. Raise your hand if you feel loved by someone. Well, that's great. I'm really glad you feel loved by someone. All right. Lift your shoulders up if you feel afraid sometimes. If you feel afraid. Anybody ever feel afraid? I know I do. Yeah. Not one of my favorite feelings. Great. All right. And now I invite a few of you to write in the chat something that's true for you. And we'll just do a few more rounds of this. And it's just a playful way to invite in some sharing and see if there's resonance or similarities and differences. So would anybody like to share something in the chat of something that's true for you? Not seeing anything in the chat yet, so I'll share a few more. So can you raise your hand if you feel like there's a client you're working with that you feel a little bit stuck about, Anybody have a client you feel a little bit stuck? Yeah, I know I do. Great. Thank you. And raise your hand if there's a client or more than one client you feel like you're doing some really good work with. Anybody? Okay, great. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll go back to our slideshow now. So back to our slideshow. And moving to the next slide or next. So yeah, and we'll now move into reviewing what are the 4 common trauma responses. I imagine this is going to be a review. But I want to invite us as we reflect on these 4 common trauma responses to just think about who in the clients you're working with, which clients are perhaps engaging in which responses. And as we move through our activities today, what activities, what intervention, what way of being with them might be helpful. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at actually the next slide, a diagram, which I think is a helpful, many of you might have seen this kind of diagram before, a helpful look at what happens in our nervous system when it's in these different states. So as you may know, our nervous system has several different states that it can be in. And it's normal for humans to have these different states of being, ranging from a very easeful, relaxed state. And you might be familiar with polyvagal theory, originated by Stephen Porges. And according to Stephen Porges, when we're in that relaxed state, we're able to connect. Porges calls it the social engagement state, where we can connect with people, we can connect with life, we can connect with animals, the trees, because we have a kind of curiosity and openness, a relaxed state. Okay. So I invite you now to find a body posture that feels really relaxed to you. So yeah, good. And there's all sorts of ways to generate or support a relaxed state. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. But one simple way, this works with some youth, but perhaps more with grownups, is just working with our breath. So invite you to simple way to relax yourself a little bit is to take a nice inhale through your nose and then purse your lips and exhale long through some pursed lips. Good. Try that 2 more times. Nice inhale through the nose. Purse your lips and exhale. Good. One more time on your own. Nice inhale through your nose and a nice exhale. Beautiful. All right. So just notice what you feel after doing that nice long exhale breath. So that's our first state is relaxed. So we can engage with others. We can engage in life. We have our cognitive capacities pretty fully working, functioning. Okay. And then when there's a trauma response, there's 4 different states we can move into. There's only 3 listed here because the 4th one kind of came in more recently. But we have a state in which our body goes into fight or flight, with the sympathetic nervous system being turned on when we feel a threat. So let's just see, what does it feel like in our bodies to be in that fight response? So if you could tense up your fists, tense up your shoulders, good, tense up your face. And yeah, this is what some young people who are in a trauma response are feeling in their bodies. Even if they're looking like this, inside, this is kind of the energy of fight, where there's rage, there's irritation, hypervigilance, anger. Great. And then exhale and relax. Do that pursed lip breath. Exhale anytime if you want to return to if that helps you, if that's a resource for you. All right. And then the flight state is more of a getting away, a panic, worry. So and wiggle your fingers and shake your head. And I'm inviting you to play with a movement that feels like flight for me, but there may be something else for you. So just feel that in your body and then relax and let that go. Great. And then we have, of course, when we move from sympathetic nervous system into the dorsal vagal nerve being activated, that's when we move from fight or flight into collapse and freeze. So yeah, so I invite you to just move back from the screen, maybe turn your head away, like you're not here, not engaging. Maybe even block your face. That's kind of a moving away. And you might think of clients, you know, who are doing that more of that freeze, dissociation, depression, helplessness. Great. And on the next slide, we'll see. So next slide, Ingrid. That there's a fourth trauma response that was added more in the last couple of years called the fawn response, which is when people who are traumatized, youth who are traumatized, become more of a people pleaser and have no boundaries or often overwhelmed and codependent. So you might think of youth in your practice or young adults in your practice who have that, more of that kind of symptomology. So, okay, so let's move into the next slide. And
may I also just cut in to say that I see a couple of hands raised, and I'm wondering, I forgot to ask if you're open to questions throughout the presentation or if you prefer them to be asked at the end.
yeah, thank you, Ingrid. I'm open to a couple of questions throughout. Sure, yeah. Would you like to invite someone to ask a question? That sounds great.
Yeah, I see a hand raised from both Patricia and Marcella. So I would invite maybe starting with Patricia, if you want to unmute and ask the question. It's still relevant. It might be that you mistakenly hit the hand.
Actually, I did not have a question, but I do now. How long do you stay in fight, flight, or one of these? How long do you stay? Is it just like 20 minutes or how long?
Oh, well, you mean for people who are like youth who are traumatized?
Yes. Like,
Well,
is this a personality trait or?
yeah, well, when someone is traumatized, having a trauma response, that's fight or flight. I mean that fight can come and go, but it can be years, it can be months. It really depends. Like I work with thinking of a 5-year-old who's has some trauma in his past, and he's sometimes really relaxed and playful and fine, and then he just gets into this period of overwhelm, and everything bothers him, and he gets aggressive with other children. So it's been about 2 years or so of that kind of fluctuating behaviors. So it can be if it's not addressed, it can be lifelong, but it can also
Thank
be
you.
a short period. Sure, you're welcome. Another question from Marcella?
Yeah, Marcella, if you still have the question, please do, you could unmute yourself and go ahead and ask a question, or otherwise we'll keep on moving. Okay, it may no longer be relevant. So, okay, well, I will advance to the next slide and
Yeah,
keep
great.
on going.
And as Sarah just wrote it, it's like it's a physiological state. So what happens with trauma is we have these different kind of memories in our bodies, and trauma becomes locked into our nervous system. So it's it becomes like a way of being. It's like Peter Levine talks about different kinds of memory, one being implicit as opposed to explicit. And that implicit memory or procedural memory, like our bodies remember and then become set in a certain way of responding to life, so that there's, with trauma, a perceived threat, even when there's no threat all the time, or it doesn't have to be all the time, but much of the time. So, great. So next slide. Okay, so another Karen Samuelson quote: "If you never heal from what hurt you, then you'll bleed on people who did not cut you." I think this is a really lovely quote that to me reflects what happens when we don't stop the chain of pain that gets passed on often from generation to generation. I worked extensively in prisons, juvenile hall, and in schools with youth with emotional disturbances, and often it's they're hurt because they didn't get what they need because of different things in their family or societal oppression, the very oppressive systems in which we live. So yeah, so this to me is an important quote on why it's so important to facilitate environments that heal and relationships that heal. All right, let's go to the next slide. And yeah, so I want to just offer some very brief general arts recommendations, and then we'll get into our arts practice for the 4 trauma responses. So on the next slide, you'll see that what I like to think about when I'm working with a young person who's showing more of the fight response is finding things that bring soothing. Of course, soothing is good for anybody, but in particular, when you have that overactive, aggressive fight, there's a threat everywhere, then finding soothing is really helpful. With the 5-year-old boy who I mentioned, we do a lot of coloring, which works for him. I've worked with many other youth where maybe coloring's not soothing, or they have too much of their inner critic come up around coloring. So you gotta find what works, but focusing on soothing activities, music, and then also accessing joy and connection, which is to me an overall thing that the arts does. It gives us a way to engage with life where we get to almost forget that we have a problem. so that promoting play, so important. With the flight response, people or youth who are more anxious, worried, nervous, then I like to focus more on the body and gradually increasing sensations, the ability to be with sensations in the body, and also resource ourselves, like what can you do when you feel anxious? What are things that are going to help? And it's not, one thing I like to say with regard to body sensations, it's not necessarily about making sensations go away or uncomfortable emotions go away, but we expand the container to hold them. We expand the ability to, have a cup where we can hold the discomfort. And then it ironically starts to go down, which is interesting to me, but it's increasing our container. All right, and on the next slide, just go over what we can do for the flight, the freeze and the fawn. Just did the fight and flight. So with youth who are frozen, then my emphasis is on just gently and playfully, without any pressure, activating, bringing in more of a life activating arts activities, but in a really slow, gentle way. So I worked for many years at a high school with youth who were had trouble being in I guess mainstream high school, and had different emotional challenges, and some of them were in foster homes, and so their life force, not every single one, but they had this dampened life force and this dissociation, and a kind showed up as apathy too. So I really worked to help them find their joy back. And then moving to the fawn response, where you have that people-pleasing, loss of self, that's where I really like to lean into empowerment and choice. And with the arts, we can really give choice of what do you like? What are you drawn to? And also what qualities are helpful when there's that loss of self. And I see there's a question from Lydia. Could you give examples of helping people find their joy back? Yeah, well, I have worked with a lot of youth, Lydia, and everyone where who have some kind of diagnosis. And then we do some, one thing that's beautiful about expressive arts, multiple arts is not every child is going to be drawn to the same art. So one boy I worked with years ago who was hugely acting out in his classroom, came from a really, really difficult background with a lot of conflict, divorce, some death in his family, and he was just acting out. He was trying to communicate through that acting out that he needed help. He was in distress inside. But once he got on, like in a theater role, oh my, he just shined. He loved to get into theater. And I worked, sometimes work in collaboration with teachers. So the teacher was just amazed to see how the same boy who was totally unable to be regulated in the classroom would be shining and regulated, given like a role that was enjoyable to him, that he felt like he found a place. Music is another one, especially when I work with teenagers. Like some teenagers I work with love to write their own music, and then they're so excited to share it. Sometimes not, but so what are those little draws, or sometimes big draws? Like, what interests the child? What are they passionate about? So it's it's very strength based rather than just focusing on the problem. What do you love? All right, let's go ahead to the next slide, and I want to really try to jump into our activities here. So I love this quote from Peter Levine: "Trauma is a fact of life. It does not, however, need to be a life sentence." And I'm gonna move through these next slides pretty quickly. So just reviewing top-down versus bottom-up approaches. So on the next slide, you'll see a quote, which to me represents more of a top-down approach to working with trauma. Moment by moment throughout our lifetime, our brains hum with the work of making meaning, weaving together many thousands of threads of information into all manner of thoughts, feelings, memories, and ideas, from Daniel Tammet. So in a top-down approach with youth, we're looking at how youth are making meaning of different situations, different relationships, even about themselves, that are not helpful, and how to then weave new ways of seeing themselves, the world. And so that's more of a top-down approach, working with our thoughts, a very kind of cognitive behavioral therapy like approach. And then we have the bottom up, working with the body. And this quote from Nisha Patel: "Unprocessed trauma does not just disappear, it is stored in your body." This is something I very much believe and have experienced in my own life, and also in my years of work with clients. So moving on to the next slide, this is just a diagram which shows a few different bottom-up approaches: sensory motor therapy, yoga therapy, EMDR. Peter Levine's somatic experiencing would be an example of a bottom-up approach. And then the top-down approaches like CBT, for example, would be helping us to think differently. So if we move on to the next slide, just a little bit about expressive arts. What is expressive arts? How does it complement other trauma approaches? How does expressive arts help youth befriend their nervous system? So, and Rachel's asking, can we have a link to the slides? I believe the answer is yes. A link will be sent.
Yes,
So
it was the slide deck was sent out in the reminder email and will also be sent out after this session. So if you look in your inbox, you should see it.
great. Thank you, Ingrid. So moving to the next slide. So expressive arts is the intentional use of a variety of art modalities to promote wellness and healing and bring tools for working with different stressors and also with trauma. So we can use ritual, we can use language arts like poetry, journaling, we can use visual arts, drama, movement and sound or music, and also symbol like sand trays is a symbolic world. A little harder to do that on Zoom, though people are finding a way. So play therapy would be more symbolic. I've, for many years, did child-centered play therapy. And so that's a great example of symbolic form of the arts. So if we move to the next slides, we can move past this one. This is just a sand tray here. You're just seeing some different examples of different arts approaches, but moving to the next slide. I love this quote from Pablo Picasso: "Art is a lie that tells the truth." So anybody resonate? Hands in the air? Or maybe not, maybe not. So, but for me as an expressive arts therapist, this is a powerful truth that speaks to the power that is possible, or the the opening that's possible when we don't go in directly into a person's psyche, but instead take the back door. And with youth in particular, I find that sometimes moving into the back door is much more, it's a way to build trust. It's a way that will help youth to open rather than shut down when we take a backdoor approach. And what do I mean by a backdoor approach? Well, let's go to the next slide. In expressive arts therapy, also drama therapy, we can think of there being this line, this continuum of interventions that we can do. And one is, on the one hand, very proximal, very personal. And on the other hand, the other end of this line, this continuum are interventions that are very distant, that are more about the imagination. So if we're working in a very personal way, we might ask something like, what's going on in your life? What's bothering you? What's supporting you? It's all about real life circumstances. Whereas working in a distance way, we start with the imaginal. We open up spaces for creation, for creativity. And in that way, we actually get to enter into the psyche, but in a way that's not so direct, and perhaps for some youth, not as threatening. So yesterday I was working with a young woman who's 19, and she wanted to do writing. She wanted to do poetry, and I gave her a few poetry prompts. And what came out in the poem was very much relevant to what's alive in her life, what she's struggling with, and also what's helping her. But it was through that poem that the truth came out. Hence, art is a lie that tells the truth. And many examples of that through the years. And so let's go to the next slide. So there's an amazing book written by Kathy Malchiati called Trauma and Expressive Arts Therapy, which I highly recommend. And in Kathy Malchiati's book, Kathy discusses these 8 principles of why the expressive arts is a great complement to trauma. I won't go over all 8 right now, but essentially, arts lets us be in our body, in our senses. When we're drawing, when we're dancing, playing, or listening to music, we're actually engaging the body, and the body is what's storing the trauma. It also, of course, gets into our brain in terms of the stories we tell about ourselves and others. But it helps us access the body, helps youth access the body. And it also gives us that opportunity to reflect, to re-script those negative stories. So there is a top-down component of the arts. And then we get to reimagine the meaning of the events of our lives. So we give youth the opportunity to frame things in a different way, but working with the body first. And then I love number 8, restoring aliveness. So what helps kind of bring in aliveness, that sense of being engaged in one's life in a full way. Okay, so next slide. Let's now, with some actions, look at how we can help youth and young adults befriend their nervous system. So moving to the next slide, we'll start part 1. Oh, sorry. First, just a word about cultural competence and expressive arts therapy. On the next slide, you'll see these 4 principles, always working in expressive arts with an awareness of any personal biases, any traditions that come from the client's background, in terms of what would be helpful in terms of bringing certain arts activities in or not, looking at any biases we might have as practitioners from our own backgrounds. And then second, I don't know why these all came out number 1, but they're all important. So they're all number 1. So attitude, valuing diversity, open-mindedness, commitment to lifelong learning, knowledge. So when I'm working with someone of a different cultural background or diverse background, really doing, my homework to learn, to educate myself. In the past few years, I have many more gender fluid clients, and that was a real learning for me to educate myself in terms of how I can best work with and support clients who are more gender fluid, for example. And then skills, building skills to incorporate culture, language, other diversity factors. So now moving into our arts practice. For part 1, you can move to the next slide. I want to just say one thing I like to do first is low pressure check-ins and scaling questions. So you might get out a pen and pencil right now. And on the next page here, next slide, you'll see a few of some of my favorite check-ins. So this is something I like to do in particular with groups of youth, asking them to share what's your name and an adjective to describe yourself. Your favorite food. This is, especially good with elementary school age children. Your favorite dessert. So I may or may not ask that with high schoolers, but I might. With high schoolers, I might ask, oh, what's a band you like? Okay, an animal you like. So just keeping it really low pressure to just start to build a field of relatedness. And I also love, in addition to those, so for you, I want to invite you to write down, okay, great, ice cream. Elisa loves ice cream, and I see your favorite color too. Wonderful. Great. And so, yeah, write down a response to one of those prompts that you feel drawn to. All right. And on the next slide, if you go to the next slide, we'll see some scaling questions. So I love using scaling questions being just very simply, if we had a scale of 1 to 5, 1 down here, 5 up here, and we think about the emotion of happy. How happy do you feel right now? You can also maybe use fingers for this, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you were to share how happy, great, you can share that in the chat. Like I feel kind of 3 or 4 right now. So I see some 3s, like I'm not like glowingly happy. I'm not happy. Great. And then you can also say, how happy would you like to feel? Well, I would like to feel, I feel a 3. I kind of like to feel a 4. All right. So scaling questions you can use with many, many things in terms of how stressed do you feel? So in particular, working with youth in trauma, if they're feeling really stressed, really anxious, and they want to feel less, you can say, okay, you're at a 5. What can we do to take it down to a 4? And what arts activities might be helpful, but not just arts. Okay, so moving on. One favorite way I like to invite youth to get into their body is through moving and dancing. So I want to invite everybody to take one finger into the screen. We're going to just do a little bit of a body parts dance. And for this,
Shall I stop sharing screens?
Sure, yeah, you can stop. Yeah, and we'll say hello. All right, and thank you, Joanne, for being here with us. Joanne's is our tech wizard. And Joanne, if you could play a song, we've got a song from the band Marshmello called Stars coming on. It's one of my son's favorite songs. So let's just try a finger dance we'll start with one finger. Yeah, you can try that now. How about 2 fingers? Any 2 you want. Great. Great. Can you make your whole hand dance? Great. Nice. And if we were in a group of youth, I might ask one person to be the leader and everybody else follow. Great. So can you follow me? Great. And let's do some elbow dancing. Nice. And if you're up for standing up, if that feels good to your body, let's go ahead and stand up. Dance the shoulders. Great. And how about the hips? Nice. So just let your body now move any way you want to move. Make it big, big movement. How about small? And really big, big. That's it. Nice. Just now turn around. Don't look at the camera and get as big as you want. Right. And getting small again. Let's all come back down and take it to an elbow dance. And hands. And fingers. All right. Thank you, everyone. Nice dancing. So we can stop the song and great. So just after having danced, just notice in your own body, if we just stick with happy, how happy you feel right now after dancing, after some dance time. So I feel like a little bit happier, like maybe a 4. Oh, I see someone feels a 10. I'm at a 5. Okay, 20. Wow. So if you got happier in this moment from dancing, then dancing was a resource for you, of course. Now, maybe for some people, you hated that dance. So that would not be a resource. Maybe that dance made you feel awful. So same thing with youth, right? So we don't know what's going to be a resource until we try, until we experiment. So let's go ahead and move through to the next slide. All right, just some dance action. Me and my child, just thought I'd throw it in there. Okay, so So bringing in this principle of big and small is something I like to do with youth in particular, because it's very concrete, the big and small, as are the body parts. And then we can also apply it to emotions, like big and small emotions, so that gradually we're helping youth build a vocabulary of emotions, of like what's going on that they're feeling inside, that, oh, I'm feeling big anger. Oh, I'm feeling just small anger. And also what can help them in different situations. So moving on, just want to invite you to share on the chat what's one emotion you like to feel, or some emotions, if you want to write a few. So feel free to share in the chat. Like, I like feeling peaceful, and I like feeling gratitude. Okay. Great. I see peaceful, gratitude, hopeful, amusement, protected. These are great. So one thing I like to do with youth, gonna maybe turn my video off the blur, is I ask youth to draw a picture of one way they like to feel. So here's me, I drew a picture of calm, and then I also wrote the word calm. And that just gives a kind of a concrete image. We're externalizing, oh, I like to feel calm. So this is more of a personal, a proximal intervention, writing calm. Okay. All right. So next slide. So what's one way you like to feel? What helps you feel that way? So if you could write in the chat, what helps you feel the way that you like to feel? So some of you wrote peaceful, some of you wrote gratitude. So go ahead and feel free to share, like, what's a resource for you? I see music. Great. Awesome. Sitting outside, movies. Great. And then moving on to the next slide, another question I like to ask youth, and that's a picture drawn by a little boy I work with. He likes to feel happy. So what's an emotion that feels challenging for you to feel? And go ahead and feel free to write that in the chat. And you can also think about your clients here. What are emotions that are challenging for them? And I'm just going to grab my art over here on my left. So one that I find challenging is feeling anxious. So I might invite youth to draw a picture. It doesn't have to be a face. I did draw a face. It could be a color that feels like that feeling. So, but drawing a picture is a way, again, to concretize it. And with a lot of youth I've worked with, we've had, we create a whole collection of cards of feeling. So it's out. It's like, oh, I feel that way today, or no, we got to make a new picture because I feel a new way I haven't felt before. So yeah, see, Yvette said anger is a challenging emotion to feel. So yeah, so moving on to the next slide, then we can ask, well, what would help you feel better or feel less angry if anger is a hard emotion for you? Okay. Now, emotional sculptures we practice a little bit already. So I'm going to call out an emotion, or we practice it when I ask you to make a pose of how you'd like to feel at the start of our workshop today. So I'm going to call out emotion, and you get to make a pose, all right, that represents that emotion. See if you can exaggerate it. Okay.
And again, I can stop the share. That way folks can see each other if you like.
Sure, if you wish, sure.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So who would like to type in the chat an emotion that is, oh, I see lots of them. Okay, we've got rejected. Okay, let's see a pose that represents rejected. Okay, how about a pose that represents numb? Good, very nice. How about calm? How about happy? Great. All right, let that go. All right, so why are we making these sculptures? What are they helpful for? Well, this is a tool from drama therapy. And one thing over time, what we can build in youth is an awareness that they actually do have some control over their emotional states, as do adults. Like we think, especially when we're traumatized, that we don't have control. But actually, I just asked you to make a pose that's happy, and you did, or many of you did. I asked you to make a pose that's angry. You had control over that. You know, and I imagine you might have felt some of the energy of anger. So the idea with sculptures is, or one idea, there's other uses for it too, is just to kind of build in some agency, some empowerment that we actually can have some control over our emotions, or at least over our responses. So moving into the next slide. Okay, we can keep going through this one and moving through this one, just some sculptures. So you can make masks of various emotions. So on the next slide, you'll see a picture. One activity I like to do is inside outside masks. So what's an emotion you show on the outside, and then what's a feeling you hide on the inside? So you can see some of these masks are turned over. And so on the outside, you would, invite the youth to show what the face they show to the world, or an emotion, or it could be a side of themselves. And then on the inside, what they don't show. And then that generates a space to reflect. Okay, next slide. So so the question from Kara about what are the cards on the left, those are just some, I often use art cards, especially with teenagers. I love using art cards of different types, at least those who resonate with them. So those are just, that's a deck of cards from an artist named Susan Boulay that I brought into this was a high school I worked at for a while, and it was with a group of young women. And they were into those cards. So we would draw a card and then talk about the wisdom in the card. The card would say, it says a little something on the other side of the image, like a quote about life. So those I also recommend actually with youth. Okay, so, okay, I'm glad you like that idea, Cara. So safety, safety is one of the big principles when we're looking at trauma-informed care. I think my top principles with trauma-informed care are safety, giving choice, agency, collaboration, and cultural sensitivity. By the way, with those masks, you can buy those, any art store might have them, like Michael's, but ssww.com, it's a store called S&S where I bought a lot of art supplies over the years, ssww.com. I can write that in the chat. That's for art supplies. So kind of bulk, you buy them in bulk if you go to S&S, WW. So safety is a big principle with trauma-informed care. And it's a very traditional thing with groups in particular to have agreements where we kind of decide as a group what helps us feel safe. And I found that works sometimes, and sometimes that doesn't work actually, for a few different reasons. But what I do feel more and more drawn to is inviting youth to create images of safety, either creating the image themselves or choosing the images. And in that way, there's more of an embodied feeling rather than, oh, I feel safe if one person talks at a time. Yes, that's important too, but really invoking that image of safety and that feeling of safety that comes from this richer array of senses, because people who are traumatized, youth who are traumatized, essentially don't feel safe in their bodies. So how can we create a full-bodied experience of safety? So the next few slides are examples of artwork or images that express safety, like forest. Here's an image created by a teen I work with in high school of what felt like safety, the open palms. And then here's done a lot of group art when I work with groups. And this is an example of group art where everybody contributes. This wasn't actually on safety, but I didn't have an example of that. But this is another activity we did as a group. So you can have a collage where you're working in your group of, let's say, 5 or 6, and everybody contributes what feels like a safe space. And you draw all at the same time is one way to do it. The next slide is also, I believe, an image of a group collage. This was at a hospital I used to work in as an expressive arts therapist. And next slide. Okay, just want to invite us to take a breath, maybe take a stretch, and see if there's any questions before we're going to do a few more activities and move into some breakout rooms.
There was a question about the creator of that art deck. If you could type it in the chat.
Yeah, I can. I might not get the spelling right, but Susan Sudan Boulay, one of my favorite artists. She passed away a few years ago. Very shamanic art that incorporated a lot from different native traditions and kind of blending images of people and animals, different animals. Really amazing art. So
Thank you.
Sure.
So yeah, we do invite anyone who has questions to unmute yourself and go ahead and verbally ask, or you can put it in the chat if you like.
Questions? Okay.
And I think we're preparing to go into our first breakout room. Yeah.
Oh, we have a few more activities, and then we'll do a breakout room. Yeah. But
Okay.
thanks for being ready there, Ingrid. Okay, so for the duration of our experiential, I want to focus on 2 kinds of resources. The first is outer resources, or things outside of ourselves that help ourselves, or things outside of the youth we work with. And then we'll do a breakout room, and then we'll focus on inner resources. So we can think of outer resources of exploring who is helpful to us, who is a safe person, what are our safe places or nourishing places, when or what time of day or what time of year even, and then what are activities that we can do. So if we go to the next slide.
Speaking of time, I actually just caught this question over text.
Yeah.
How much time should be spent per session?
How much time spent, you mean in terms of like doing expressive arts? Well, I work traditionally with 50-minute sessions when I'm working in my private practice. When I'm working at a school or in another context, it can really, really vary depending on what's going on in that particular system. It might be 30 minutes. When I worked in the hospital with youth, it might be an hour and a half if that's the time we have. So it really depends. With groups, I think it's nice with groups of youth to have at least 60 minutes for, I'd say, middle school through high school. Younger children, maybe 45 minutes.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. All right, so I invite you to get out a piece of paper and something to draw or write with. And so we have on this page some outer resourcing prompts. And instead of reading all of these, I'll just read the first one. Something that helps me feel calm is, and feel free to write that down either in the chat or on your own piece of paper. So yeah, looking for what helps bring youth back to that regulated state where they can be in their, it's called the ventral vagal nerve is active. They're in that social engagement. They can actually connect. So I see nature, deep breaths, great. Beautiful. Focusing on your belly. And moving on to the next slide. I invite you now to explore the who by drawing a picture of or writing down who is someone who is supportive in your life. Who is someone who is really supportive in your life right now? So, you know, I made a card and I have a few dear friends who are very supportive. So I just drew a picture to represent the who. And I see from Melissa, your mom, awesome. So inviting youth to draw who is supportive in their life. And these are other questions that you can also use as prompts to kind of draw out more of what are, you know, who are the supportive people, because, you know, as the big ACEs study informed us, one of the most helpful things with healing from trauma for youth who have been traumatized is when youth have at least one person who is consistent and supportive to them. So let's move to the next slide. So next is to look at where and when. So where's a place you like to spend time? I'm just looking at my art over here. And I invite you to draw a picture right now. So just actually really draw a picture. I'm giving you a minute to draw a picture of a place you like to spend time. Here's mine. And as you draw that picture, just notice how you feel as you're drawing. And you might also think about what is a time of day that you like. Like, what's your favorite time of day? Like mine is the morning, the sunrise. Or what's your favorite time of year? Okay, and moving on to the next slide. I'm going to look now at so we're looking at these resources of outer resources that help us. So what are supportive activities? So you might ask youth, what's something you enjoy doing when you're not in school? Can you draw a picture of something you like? So I drew a picture. I like yoga. I like a lot of things, but I drew a picture because I want to be true to me, yoga. So now take a moment to draw an activity you like. Okay. Great. And then moving to the next slide. So by the way, with activities, you can invite youth to play charades, like have them act out activities that they like. I've done that with a lot of different age groups, though more with elementary school age, I would say. You can invite other kinds of art expression. Here's a 4x4 canvases that I use with a group of other expressive arts therapists in a project we did at a hospital, where we invited both youth and adults to draw images of hope, gratitude, and inspiration. And on the next slide. Other thing you might try is different forms of heart art. So you can use different prompts here. Draw a heart and color it in with colors that feel good to you, right? So there's what I made. Or sometimes making a heart for somebody else, like actually drawing something for someone is resourcing and calming, or it engages the youth. So here's a heart I drew for somebody. Or option 3, what do you feel in your own heart? Can you draw what you feel in your heart? Okay. And having a container, like having a shape, can be helpful. A shape like a heart, or even having images to color, like a mandala or an animal, like coloring books, can be really calming for some youth. And then some will not want that. So we'll want to just, be more experimental and kind of uncontained in their artistic expression. So what's a resource for one might not be for someone else. Okay, let's move to the next slide. And I think it might be almost time for breakout rooms. So another thing you can ask is, what's a meaningful object? And this is something I find myself doing more when I'm working online these days with youth. So what's a meaningful object to you? And tell me about it. And so I have this feather that's meaningful to me, for example. But you could also, you can ask them to tell a story about their object. You can also speak as the object. So I might say to the youth, like, let's say this was their feather. I say, well, if the feather could speak, what message would it give you? Or if the feather could tell a story, what would it tell a story about? So meaningful objects are lovely to work with as resources too. All right, and moving to the next slide. Okay, great. So it's time for breakout rooms. And in our breakout rooms in a moment, we'll get into groups of 3, about 3, and we'll have about 9 minutes, 3 minutes each to share on, well, first, what's an animal you like? And just see if that animal has any wisdom for you in your life. And second, what's an activity we've done so far that could be helpful to one of your clients, or that you might adapt? So really invite in thinking about, oh, they might not do that, but I could adapt it in this way. So we can go back to the larger group, and we'll take time now to go to the breakout rooms and see you in 9 minutes. Yeah, so moving on to the next part of our training today, part 2, want to invite us to look now at inner resources. This is something I'm always thinking about, is what are resources that are going to be helpful to youth in the freeze response, the fight, flight, or fawn. So inner resourcing prompts are more about going within, as opposed to going with, on the outside for help. So we have our outer resources, and I have my collection now of cards of my different outer resources, which you can do with your youth, is make a toolkit. These are all things that help me to feel calm. But inner resources are more about looking at our qualities in ourselves that are helpful, and also going into our imagination more. So just invite you to write down on a piece of paper response to these 4 prompts. So go ahead and write down something you like about yourself. And now something you're proud of. And write down something you learned last year. or would like to learn this year. Now write down something positive that your friend would say about you, something positive. Great. And now with the words you just wrote down, I invite you to use at least 4 of those words and write a one-line poem starting with the words, I am. Okay. And if you want to weave into the poem the name of the animal you like, I know I asked you to share about animals. So this is called an I am poem. And so just a lovely, simple poetry exercise. So for example, I am a dolphin, kind and free. Growing into myself. That's my I am poem. Just what wanted to come out. So go ahead and just take a moment, use those words you wrote down, maybe that animal you chose to, and write an I am poem. And if you'd like to share your I am poem, please share it in the chat. I am a mom from Sarah. Beautiful. Great. Anybody want to share your I am poem? So an I am poem can become like a simple affirmation, just a way of, especially if you're working with a youth who tends to have a lot of negative self-thoughts. This is a creative way. We don't even have to use the word affirmation. If you just start writing poetry that's leaning into their strengths and leaning into what's positive about them. You know, you don't, again, have to name it, but it's just happening in the poetry prompt. So Yvette, I am creative. Lovely. So if anybody else wants to share your I am poem, please do. It's another simple activity. I am energetic from Ivan. Really nice. All right. I am me from Yancy. I love it. You are you. I am resilient. I'm free as the birds. Oh, I love seeing these kind of just flood in now. So moving to the next slide. Let's go ahead and move on. And so I do like to invite in, after reflecting on helpful emotions, challenging emotions, to also reflect with youth on helpful qualities and unhelpful qualities. So if we go to the next slide, here's a list of perhaps more helpful qualities. So I want to invite you each to think of what's one quality in yourself out of this list, or not on the list, that that would be helpful to you in your life right now. So if you were to choose a quality that you could actively nourish in yourself, that is, you know, with whatever you're navigating in your life, whatever struggles, stresses, joys. Like for me, a quality that I keep coming back to is, actually it's not on here, but faith, having faith. So just write down one quality. Trustworthy from Sarah. Thank you. Great. All right, and then moving to the next slide. This is just a more simple version of that I might use with younger children, just real simple words, and also choosing words that are, you know, kind of work with the child's cultural background, diversity factors. So I would adjust my list of words and go ahead to the next slide. So now looking at challenging qualities. So similar question is, if we go to the next slide, what's a challenging quality in yourself? Like, you know, youth who are stuck in the fight response might just be always aggressive, or in the flight response might be self-destructive in some way. So what for you is a quality that's challenging? Now, a little trick here that I do with youth sometimes that has to do with the distance versus proximal continuum I was talking about earlier, is sometimes I ask a youth, well, what's a quality you find challenging in someone else? Or what's a quality you like in someone else? If they don't want to talk about themselves, it's just an easier way to open up space. All right, so moving to the next slide. This is a more simplified slide of some challenging qualities. All right, and then moving on. Okay, so I invite you to take time now to think about that one quality that you want to experience more of. And if you imagine, like for me, I'm imagining faith, but I know some of you wrote trustworthy or whatever is the quality. You can write it in the chat. What color would that quality be? What shape, if it had a shape, or part of nature even? Or if that quality was represented by an image, what would it be? So now in the chat, I invite you to just describe that quality with an image, a color, a shape. Okay. And you can, great, beautiful, yellow sun circle, black. I'm seeing some emojis. And now you can also write an I am poem with some of those words. So I am, say I am faith. I am the ocean, for example, is coming to my mind when I think of faith. So what for you is an image of your quality? I see the mountain from Janice, beautiful. So you can invite youth to draw or paint images, or you could do the opposite. You can have them draw, paint whatever they want to draw or paint, and then talk about, well, what is the quality in this image that you like? Wow, that mountain seems really strong, or that rainbow seems really whatever it is. So you can work either way. Let's go to the next slide. You can also make mandala collages based on these inner resources, these inner qualities. So if you go through the next few slides, we'll see examples of this activity. You can use some prompts again, like I just did, but we can just move through these slides and see, yeah, different images of that youth have created. And here's when I was with a group and they're all looking at each other's mandalas, things they love about themselves or about the world. All right, moving into the next slide. Here's some, everybody sharing. Great, so just a short case study here. Rosie is an 18-year-old, now 19, Filipina cisgendered female who experienced a lot of trauma related to physical abuse, divorce. Also, according to her, her Mormon upbringing was very challenging for her when she realized it didn't really resonate, but yet her family wanted her to be Mormon. And so she was showing a lot of symptoms of, well, 3 categories: fight, freeze, and flight. So she was frequently irritable, had some anxiety and sometimes panic attacks. Not as much the fight, but sometimes she would get into fights with her boyfriend. And her main coping mechanism was marijuana. And she ended up also working at a marijuana facility and getting fired. But what were Rosie's biggest supports in her own trauma healing, or the outer supports, were her boyfriend actually was a real calming, helpful, co-regulating presence. So being with her boyfriend when she was dysregulated, that really helped her. And she couldn't be with her boyfriend all the time, of course. So we had to find other supports, but also really was strong in our work together, and still is. She's someone I'm still working with, is spirituality. Rosie really felt like her spirituality was not supported by her family, and yet it was such a resource. So tapping into ancestor work, into practices that were spiritually aligned for her, ended up being what really, I think, tipped Rosie over the edge, in terms of now she's on a wave of being connected with her passions, and she's wanting to become an herbalist. So she also was really interested in painting, and so she began painting, and that began to get her into a regulated place, just the painting itself. And from there, it was like a ripple effect where she started writing music again. She began tuning into other passions. So Rosie's one example of someone who was in a very traumatized, kind of a frozen state, had a lot of hopelessness, and now is really doing a lot better. Now that doesn't mean that she doesn't struggle, of course. Healing from trauma doesn't mean that kids never struggle. Everyone, including youth, have ups and downs, but what we do is we become better able to access resources, and we become bigger containers that we're able to cope with lots of different waves, whereas before our window of tolerance was smaller. It's like just a little bit of anxiety and it would blow Rosie off, like she couldn't do anything for a day. But now she knows how to work with when anxiety starts to come in. She has different options. She has some freedom to choose options rather than to be suffocated. All right, next slide.
And if you don't mind, there's a participant question regarding what is cisgendered?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, a cisgendered female is a person who is born with, it was assigned the female gender at birth, a female sex, and then also feels like a female, like identifies as a female. That's cisgendered. Like a cisgendered male, somebody who is assigned sex male at birth and feels like a male. Okay. There's some people who are born with female, identifies as a female at birth, but then they feel like they identify as a male. So anyhow, that's getting into gender fluidity, but I hope that's helpful. Okay, so moving on, here's one of Rosie's mandalas. I love taking this in. Just notice how you feel looking at these words. Okay, and moving on to resource triptychs. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see instructions for a triptych or a trifold. And a triptych is really, or a trifold is just a piece of paper we fold into 3 parts. So you can do this now, if you wish. I'm folding this paper into 3 parts. And then we've created 3 columns. This is a very common expressive arts activity. And in each of the columns, we draw or write or collage some prompt. So for this triptych, if we have more time, I think we're going to skip this, but I'll describe it. On one column, you write something I like about myself. Okay. And then you could write or put pictures of something you like about yourself. Second column, something that supports me or calms me or makes me happy. So fill that into the second column. Third column, one way I'm growing is, all right. So there's an example of a trifold. Now we can do a trifold for other categories too, like maybe might do something like one feeling I'm feeling today is, one feeling I'd like to feel is, third column, one thing that's going to help me feel how I'd like to feel is. Okay, we come up with creative prompts. So that's a trifold or a triptych. And moving on, there's some examples of triptychs. And again, when I work with groups, I like to have a space where we can see each other's art. So those are all different trifolds. Okay, next slide. All right, so we can also invite in different senses to invoke different qualities, like if there was a sound to represent the quality you want to have more of in your life, like trustworthy or whatever it is, what sound would that be? Or what song would that be? Next slide. Okay, and so another thing we can do to bring together all of our resources, both inner and outer, is we could create a kind of collage or even just a list of our inner and our outer resources. So I made one here of my inner and outer resources, just a simple paper folded in half. Yeah, you can have your youth do this. So they have a visual, they have like an anchor of like, oh yeah, I could, an outer resource for me. Oh yeah, I forgot. I like to take baths. I'm going to take a bath. So it's listed out. Another nice way to do this instead of the half folded paper is an inner circle and an outer circle. So on the inner circle, you write or draw inner resources, outer circle, outer resources. Okay. All right, moving to the next slide. Okay, so one way I love to invite in imagination as a resource is by asking youth to create their own superheroine or superhero. Okay, so I want to invite you to do this now, since we're coming into the home stretch here. Probably do it the third way through writing, but you could say, go find 3 props and make yourself into a superhero super fast. It says 3 props or costumes. So I'm just looking around at what I have. Well, I know I have my feather. That could be one of my props, my superhero. What else do I have in here? Okay, I have a tape. There's my superhero crown. And what else is going to be part of my superhero agenda? Okay, I have a menorah. Well, that's going to be my silly superhero. All right, I'm just giving you an example, but so inviting in quick imagination, create a superhero using 3 costumes or props. Okay, or you could draw the superheroine or superhero. But for right now, I invite you to, if you were to invent a superhero. And let's say this superhero has in its name the quality you want to embody or you want to bring more of into your life. Like mine is faith. So what's a superhero name that has that quality? Okay. And I'm just going to go with Fabulous Faith is the name of my superheroine. I think I'll call her a superheroine. And so go ahead and think of your super heroine or hero name using that word, that quality. And where does your super person live? Like mine lives in people's hearts. It's kind of amazing, but it's true. Faith lives in people's hearts. And what is your superhero like to do? Well, Fabulous Faith likes to help people when they feel uncertain or afraid. And what's the biggest problem your superhero faces? So go ahead and just take, let's take 2 minutes to write in response to these prompts, and then I invite you to share in the chat. So for example, the biggest problem Faith faces is a dude named Dougie Doubt. Okay, that's my superhero. So just take a minute or two and have fun with this. We'll come up with a superheroine name based on your quality, where they live, what do they like to do, what's their biggest problem they face. Okay, so feel free to share in the chat here. And great, we've got Crippled Courage and his sidekick, Mr. Humble. Right on. Thank you, David. Like to get to know those characters more. I'm curious. Expansive confidence lives in the bellies, shoulders, and voices of people. Ooh, expanded confidence. Vibrant free hope lives in the yellow sun. Oh, these are great. Thank you. So keep sharing, please. Keep sharing. And Ingrid, if you could go to the next slide. All right. So one thing we can now launch into, sometimes using the superheroes to go into this, is to ask youth to write their own personal myth or fairy tale. So using this character now, if you were to tell a story about your life through the character and something hard this character went through, what would it be? Like for me, like Fabulous Faith grew up in a family that were very big skeptics. They were called the skeptical squirrels. And those skeptical squirrels did not want Fabulous Faith to be free. And so every day, Faith had to kind of make her way past the skeptical squirrels to find her way to the river, because she just wanted to be at the river. So anyhow, I'm making up a story in the moment here. We don't have time to fully do this activity, but now we're stepping into the imagination and inviting youth to take this character and tell a story that is somewhat like their life story, or it has some parallels, but tell it through the character. And that's an example of a distance exercise and a distance expressive arts exercise where we're using our imagination, but yet there will be some truth and probably some wisdom in that story, and also some expression of what needs to be expressed. So we don't have a lot of time, but I want to just go back into some breakout rooms for, how about just 3 minutes. We'll get into breakout rooms and share your superhero, and share if you could write a myth or a story about your life, like in the form of a mythic kind of thing. What might be a title, or like just give your buddies a little hint. All right. So let's go to breakout rooms, and we'll be back in a little more than 3 minutes. So 1 minute each. So we have just a few minutes left, and I want to thank everyone for being willing to try these perhaps new things, perhaps not new for some of you. But I do want to leave just a few minutes for questions and any comments on what was valuable, what you might try or adapt according to your clients. So anybody have any comments or
Just want to say I appreciate giving us a little bit of everything and actual things that we can use, because a lot of them talk in theory, but it was really nice to get like, oh, I have an activity I can work off of. So I really appreciate that. They were all really helpful.
Oh, I'm so glad. Great. That was my hope, to offer some really practical things that you can bring back to your work. Great.
Hi, I just wanted to piggyback off what she said about everything with, things that we could use. I work in the school system. Um, my question is, I've seen a lot of things. I've ordered a lot of like books and stuff dealing with art therapy, and it's always stated that you have to be trained to provide that type of therapy, art, play, drama. So where do we find that? I mean, because I want to make that part of my toolkit, if you would have it, you know.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'm so glad that this resonates with you and you want to, make this part of your toolkit. A good place to start is through the International Expressive Arts Therapy Association. They have a website and they have I'll write that in the chat. They have actually, in January, they have a conference that they're putting on online. So I would suggest checking out their trainings. And then you can also get a list of expressive arts therapists through them. There's quite a few, like hundreds of expressive arts therapists that are registered through them. And they, each one might be offering trainings as well. But that would be a good place to start. Yada.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments? And thank you for the comments in the chat box. I'm enjoying kind of scanning through what you're writing here. Anybody else want to share verbally? Any suggestions for getting materials in Spanish? Yeah, thank you, Daisy. I speak Spanish. I work a lot with Spanish speakers. There are some great expressive arts books that are translated into Spanish where you can find activities. I often translate a lot of stuff myself, or sometimes use Google Translate because it's pretty good and easy. So those are a few suggestions. And great. Any other questions or reflections on what was helpful and what you might have wanted more of? If we, looks like, okay, well, all right. So one thing that I didn't share in the presentation, but I like to bring into both groups of youth and also individuals is the practice of gratitude. So at the end of the slideshow, there's the image of these little gratitude boxes. They're heart-shaped boxes, but they can be of any shape. So I just want to imagine that you have a gratitude box here in your heart, and just invite you to name, put one thing there's the gratitude box. Thank you, Ingrid. Oh, you're so on it. Thank you. So you can cut up little pieces of paper and make your own gratitude box, and just put one thing you're grateful for in that box. These are a few boxes created by some teens that I worked with. So yeah, if anything you want to share that you're grateful for, thank you for the chat. Thank you, Edove. And I'm going to hand it over to Ingrid. And thank you, Ingrid, and thank you, Joanne, for all your support and all the staff at MHTTC. Just want to acknowledge you for all that you do to put these trainings out there so accessible for so many people in the mental health field.
Absolutely. Yes, it's our pleasure. And this is a wonderful presentation. So we want to say thank you so much, Suraya, for bringing all these incredible resources and knowledge and experiences to our network. And I'm here on the resources slide that Suraya put together, which is part of the slide deck that was emailed before the session. We'll also follow up with one last slide deck as a PDF. Where you can see all these links, which are great resources. And we just want to close out just with a couple more words from the MHTTC, just to say that this is one of many trainings. We have more coming up, which you'll see in this slide. And that this session was recorded with the exception of the breakout groups. And so we'll be loading this recording to our website with the link you see there within probably about a month at the most. Also, a certificate of completion will automatically be sent out to everyone. And for those of you who may be interested in continuing education credits or hours, those we also have two hours of credit available for this session. We verify attendance, but yeah, you could just follow the link there to make your application. It would just be a $25 fee, and follow up via the email for more information. And we just want to say thank you again for coming and joining us. We're so happy to have you all in the session. And we have a lot of social media kind of posts that we put up for sessions and things like that. So get social with us, and thank you again.